Thank you for joining our live stream. Welcome. If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel from the campaigning team at Good Law Project, and I'm really excited to be joined here today by an inspiring environmental entrepreneur, your climate activist and green energy pioneer, Dale Vince. Welcome, welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So before we do any proper introductions, I'm just going to invite anybody listening and watching along to share your questions in the chat on the different channels that you'll be on. In the comments, we're going to be looking out for your questions, and we'll bring them over to Dale as we're going through our conversation today. And thank you also to everybody who submitted their questions in advance. We have got some of those ready to ask Dale as well. So welcome, Dale Vince. Thank you so much for coming to speak with Good Law Project. It's genuinely like a real pleasure to have you. And many people, there's quite a lot to go in the introduction. Many people will know you as the founder of the green energy company Ecotricity. And obviously through that and other things, you've had a massive impact and influence in this country and probably beyond in paving the way for green energy and greener approaches. And it's fair to say there's quite a few strings to your bow. We've also got the Sustainable Football Club that you run, Forest Green Rovers. And it sounds like it's been a busy week for you as well with launching the new edition of your book manifesto. So congrats on that. Hope that's been going well. So yeah, quite a full CV and probably not something I can do justice in a short intro. So yeah, if you would love to introduce yourself in your own words, we'd love that too.
Yeah,
for everyone watching.
Yeah, no problems. Look, it's a pleasure for me to be here actually as well. I've been working with the Good Law Project for a while. Jolion's a friend. I was only talking today in the media actually about something we fought together and won, which was the carried interest case where HMRC were giving preferential treatment to private equity investors, giving them basically big tax cuts. And I was just talking to the media about that today. You remind me. But I did start by forming Ecotricity, world's first green energy company. Then I built Britain's first electric car, world's first national network of charging points for electric cars, because my mission evolved from energy in the 90s to energy, transport, and food in the 2000s, because those three things are 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint. And that was a really informative statistic that I bumped into in the early 2000s. Moved into food, partly via Forest Green Rovers, our football club, greenest in the world according to FIFA and the United Nations. We're a vegan football club. We make school dinners now as well. We're in one in 4 English primary schools with our food. And I also make diamonds from atmospheric carbon. I've got some here that I'm wearing. Thank you. And we make small windmills as well. I think we're the last UK manufacturer of small windmills that we've been hanging on in the years of the Tory ban. We've got a bunch of other things in R&D and a bunch of other things that we do, but all of our work is about sustainability and the concept of a green Britain. We're releasing a series of policy ideas in energy, transport, and food for the next Labour government. There's so many things that we can do are really simple, don't cost money, have a huge impact on the cost of living and the growth in our economy, that kind of stuff. Oh, and of course, green gas. I forgot to mention green gas. We've pioneered this idea of making gas from grass, alternative to heat pumps. And more recently, we've reinvented the cow, having found a way to extract human edible protein from grass as well as gas. So we can make energy and food from the same piece of land for the first time ever. And that's really quite revolutionary. And it's going to help us get to a green Britain. I think that's it in a nutshell. It'll do anyway.
It's a pretty impressive, roster, portfolio of different things. And actually, you said in there's loads of things where you said it was like a world first, and like really being at the beginning of something and trying to do something differently, and therefore being the first people to do it, or the first person to kind of really champion it. Looking back over quite a lot of those world firsts, is there anything that you say you're like most proud of, or are you more like forwards looking and just all about what's coming next? What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, pride is an emotion or a feeling that I don't have. I'm asked the question quite often. So I'm pleased when things are adopted, become mainstream. All of the things that we've worked on have become mainstream: green energy, electrified transport, even plant-based living, veganism, call it what you will. Green football and green sport are taking off. We have imitators in the world of carbon captured diamonds. And actually, most recently, we launched the world's first green airline to run on hydrogen. And that one was super exciting because flying, for me, is like the last piece of a puzzle in terms of hearts and minds, how we persuade people to take this journey with us to a low impact lifestyle, net zero, whatever it is you want to call it. People are held back by the things that they feel they're being asked to give up. And this is the core battleground in my experience. All of the things we've done in energy, transport, and food, we've made versions of what we love and like to have that are at least as good as what we have already in energy, in transport, and in food. And yet flying is one of those things that we're being told all of the time, we just have to give up flying. And that's not a message that's going to help to bring millions of people with us, tens of millions of people with us. But the message that we can fly sustainably with a zero carbon footprint at the same price, that's a message that will get people to come with us, because it kind of completes the picture. We've got electric cars, we've got renewable energy, we've got plant-based eating, and electric buses are on the road, electric trains are coming, the new version that doesn't have overhead power lines and stuff like that, electric HGVs are coming, and now there's an electric airline in the world. We can fly electric, and for me, that's just marvelous.
It's pretty exciting. And I think, something you said there is really important. It's not about kind of focusing in on what people might need to give up or kind of sacrifice. It's like what you stand to gain, what's the kind of what the extra value is, and kind of where it's not like framed in that negative sense, and what can be really exciting. So you bring buckets of that, which is great. So as you know, because we've worked with you at Good Law Project, our bread and butter is basically trying to use the law as a vehicle or a force for good in the world, for a fairer, better, greener future. Sometimes we're more successful than other times, but that's kind of like how we try and approach making change. And I know that you've spent, so many years building sustainable businesses and showing that you can do business, but do it differently. And in the new version of your book, obviously, there's a lot about how you're like leaning to spend time in the political sphere and trying to influence change. You mentioned there about building policy recommendations. What's changed for you in how you actually engage for fighting for what you believe in?
Oh, interesting. I can wrap the answer into that in a couple of different ways. Firstly, I want to say that we're so similar as organizations because we use business as a tool to change the world. We're not in business for the sake of business like most people are. I like to make a point by asking a question. This question that's kind of famous in Norfolk, where I came from. I don't know if it travels or has traveled, but do you live to eat or do you eat to live? And we eat to live. As a business, we make money, but we make it to put it back into our mission. We don't give it to shareholders. We're a not for dividend company. And it's a kind of new concept, just a mission-led business, reinvesting everything that we make into our mission. And we're very similar to Good Law in that respect. Conventionally, a business lives to eat, right? It lives to make money. And that's not us. And I spent probably 3 decades doing that, from the beginning of Ecotricity in 1995, choosing business as the best way to try and change how energy was made in Britain. Then it moved into food and transport and a whole range of different businesses, proving that actually an environment approach to these areas of life can work and can be commercial. And in that 30 years, technology has moved along behind us, and the economics have improved along behind us, so that right now we can say that we have all of the technology we need. The economics are on our side, and the people increasingly are too. The one thing that we don't have is a government that gets it, that understands the green economy and does something about it, which brings us to, I think, a really exciting point in history, a point of great potential. We have an election this year. We have an opposition party that does get the green economy. We have a government that's clapped out basically 14 years of infighting and they have no real ideas, disastrous for our country, but right now are taking an anti-green stance for their manifesto when it comes. We have a very simple, clear choice and a massive opportunity to get a government that gets the green economy. The opportunities, we'll probably talk about them in a minute, so I won't go on about it, but they're just enormous. But we've come to this place over a period of, I would say, probably 3 decades in my experience, from a point where wind energy was expensive, niche and quirky, to a place where it's a global mainstream business, and we can build it here in Britain for no money, no public money at all. And so the idea, touted often by Sunak and the government, that we need money for green policies and we can't afford it and we have to slow the transition down. That is BS, actually. If you look at the reality of renewable energy, onshore wind and solar, they're the cheapest forms of energy we can make and the fastest and the cleanest, and we need no public money for them. And so these are the opportunities. The world of green, the economy, and green, the environment, they've overlapped completely. And it's something that not a lot of people are aware of, because it's only just happened, I would say, in the last couple of years. And it gives us this incredible opportunity, because we're not saying anymore it's about ice caps and polar bears or different parts of the world, or an event that's coming in some decades away. We know the climate crisis is here right now. We know it's happening right here. But what we're arguing for is going to create jobs and real economic growth here. And fighting the climate crisis will just be the icing on the cake.
Yeah, so it's pulling it together and bringing it into the present. I think something that you said there was quite interesting, is that like we have the technology, like the economy can like bring, can work and can be the structure, and people are there too, but the government just puts so much in the way. And we definitely see that, and in a lot of our campaigning and our legal campaigns that we bring, we've got something going on at the moment around onshore wind, something else around like greener homes, and just it really does feel like this government is intent on just putting blockers in the way of progress rather than unblocking that and just throwing barriers in the way. And that it sounds like that kind of frontier of fighting it on the political front is really, really important to you. So just want to come back to that again for a moment and ask you a little bit about something you've talked about in recent months, about shifting your sort of support from Just Stop Oil and funding them as an organisation to really taking an approach around Just Stop the Tories, and then also your views, if you're up for sharing them, about the importance of the youth vote and kind of basically the significance of this next election.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, firstly, I just want to say, I think the government are taking an anti-green stance for cynical, selfish reasons. They think it's a chance to open up a culture war and give them a chance in the next election. I don't believe that they're doing this on economic grounds. They're doing it against the data, against the science. And I think that's a tragic thing for a government, the leadership of our country, to adopt that stance. We're putting out a report shortly that shows the cost of cutting the green crap, something that Cameron did about 10 years ago. He ended the code for zero carbon new homes. He banned onshore wind. He banned onshore solar. The numbers we've crunched so far show that that's cost us as a country £20 billion. And we're about to put out a position paper on this that shows that green policies actually are saving us money, and tearing them up is costing us money. And Rishi Sunak is about to repeat the mistakes of a previous Tory prime minister. That's a slight aside from your question, yeah. I think.
Well, but to pick up on that, and then you hear the rhetoric around like long-term decision making. Yeah. And actually, there was one part of your book I really loved so much that I wrote it down, which is sometimes the world looks like a gas-guzzling car crash run by insane children. I thought, ooh, feels quite apt at the moment. But yeah, sorry, let's know about
no, you're okay. Yes, I mean, the pivot from Just Stop Oil to Just Stop the Tories was just a logical one. It was last summer, which I think of as the summer of Just Stop Oil. I think they were at their peak, certainly in terms of media attention they were getting, and the kind of the angst in the media and in the public about whether the disruption they were causing had kind of run its course and they should stop now. I think Keir Starmer came out with quite a funny line, "Just go home." I quite like that one. I was on protest with Just Stop Oil. I mean, I love the group. I love the people. They put their livelihoods and their freedoms on the line for this cause. They feel very passionate about it. It's a simple ask. Why should we be drilling for new oil and gas? It doesn't make any sense. Moral and economic madness, according to the United Nations. So the cause is right. The method was right at the time. But by the end of that summer, the Tories had begun to weaponize that protest to use it against Labour, because I had a link with both Labour and Just Stop Oil as a funder of both, or a donor to both. And they tried to make spurious links around that. And I could see that also Rishi Sunak had not listened to the protest, or certainly if he had listened, he did listen clearly, because sorry, what I'm trying to say is, he had no intention of stopping oil. He saw electoral opportunity in doubling and trebling down on his oil plans instead. So the protest was having the opposite effect on the licensing for new oil and gas in the North Sea than was intended. He increased it because he saw electoral mileage in it. And so I just reached the conclusion that the only way to stop oil was to stop the Tories. And we can do that at the ballot box. And last summer, it looked like within 12 months, we'd have a chance to do that. we're still probably 8 months away now, but that's okay. Chance is coming, and it's a big one. And yeah, I mean, that was it. It was a logical pivot to just stop the Tories. Sorry, you mentioned the youth vote. I'm catching my wits now. Yes, the importance of the youth vote. Age 18 to 24. The Tories have made it the hardest election to vote in for everybody, but especially it's true if you're 18 to 24 because you won't have the ID that is now required and wasn't before. There's a reason for that. 80 to 90% of people in that age group don't vote Tory. And so these rules are to rig the election. I think the first by-election fought under these new rules saw something like 13,000 people disenfranchised by the new rules. And in the case of voter fraud in our country, we've had maybe a handful of cases in 10 years or something. It's not actually a problem. The Electoral Commission criticized the new rules after the by-election. And I think it was Robert Jenrick, if I'm right, who was kind of one of the architects of the new legislation, admitted it was wrong and said it needed to be changed, but it won't be changed. You know that it won't. So we're launching a campaign called Just Vote. It's kind of themed like Just Stop Oil and Just Stop the Tories, because to do that, we have to just vote. And we're going to encourage as many 18 to 24-year-olds as we can to vote. Firstly, they have to register. There are 3.5 million first-time voters in this election. We've got to reach them in particular because they won't have any kind of habit formed around voting or not voting. And 50% of people aged 18 to 24 don't vote. And we thought that's a key demographic until we looked a little bit further and we found that that 50% stat runs all the way up to the age of 50. So 18 to 50, 50% of people just don't vote, which is, is quite mad, actually, quite horrendous. I think our electoral system makes it difficult. The Tories' new rules make it more difficult. And post this election, when it comes, and hopefully Labour wins, one of the things we'll pivot to is to campaign for a more digital democracy so that we can all register to vote and vote through an app. I think that would increase voter participation in our country, by an incredible amount. It should be easy in the modern world to just vote through your phone. That's what I think.
It's really interesting. And actually, it just goes to show that I think, your commitment to, paving the way for green energy, and then this, you kind of how you've kind of evolved your approach and changed and see other areas where change is possible. I think something that can sometimes feel a little bit disheartening is, campaigning for change and then things just not changing or things feeling like they're getting worse. I think that sometimes it can, especially with this government in charge, it can feel a little bit depressing, especially when you look at, their choices around the environment and our futures. And something that really comes across in this conversation, but also in your book, is just a real sense of hope and can do, there are things that can change. This is what we're going to do about it. And it feels like you really embrace a very optimistic and positive approach, even when things can feel a bit bleak. So I was just, I don't know, it's a little bit more like life advice, but how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you are an optimist, or how do you sort of try and embrace being hopeful? How do you not just think, oh God, I'm sick of this?
Well, I guess I don't spend a lot of time thinking about things as difficulties that can't be overcome, I suppose. I don't really know. I've spent my life doing things that I believed in, irrespective of whether the world around me also believed in them. And I've seen those things in energy, transport, and food become mainstream. This whole concept of sustainability, plant-based living. I was doing that 40 years ago when it was a wild thing to tell anybody that you didn't eat animals, honestly. And it's become much more mainstream now, for example. So I've never been bothered about what conventional thinking or conventional wisdom might suggest is the right or the wrong thing. It's my favorite oxymoron, by the way, conventional wisdom. And I'm just motivated by what I can see needs to be done, to bring more fairness to the world, more sustainability to the world. And I think the two things are linked. I think we can't have true sustainability without social justice. And I'm just motivated to make it happen. And I guess I've built up a kind of a catalog of experience, actually, that says we can do these things that look impossible. Green energy back in the day looked impossible. Fast forward 25 years, making diamonds from atmospheric carbon looked impossible. It looked like the most crazy thing I'd ever said we were going to do. It took 7 years of R&D, but now we do it. And all of the things, protein from grass, where's that come from? What's really interesting there is, and I love statistics that are important, core statistics, not for the sake of it, not the confusing ones, but we grow enough grass in Britain right now, and we feed it to animals to provide twice the protein that we eat entirely as a nation every year from all forms. So already we have the answer under our feet in terms of food security, actually, and plant-based protein, more than we need, way more than we need. We can be an exporter. I think the popular term would be a protein superpower or something, because that gets applied to green energy all of the time.
Love it. So yeah, quite literally under our feet. And that leads us in really nicely. We've got some questions from supporters of Good Law Project that sent them in advance for you. And so I'll share some of them now with you. And the first one actually is from Annalise, and she wants to know a little bit more about the green gas that you've been just talking about there. So she says, how is the green gas from grass project going? Given the government's recent announcement about more gas extraction, I was surprised this doesn't seem to have been mentioned in response, although I could have missed it, of course, she says. So yeah, for everybody like watching along, listening along, who may not know about it, can you tell us a little bit more about this whole idea generally, and reinventing the can?
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I'll whiz back to the early 2000s, late 90s. We formed the world's first green energy company, but back then it meant electricity from the wind and the sun. We could make electricity and put it in the grid instead of from fossil fuels. And I always felt that we had to give gas up. Around about 2010, I discovered that we could make gas and we could put it into the grid like we do electricity, and we could do it from organic materials, a process called anaerobic digestion. We brought green gas to Britain in 2010, but it had drawbacks because the conventional ways of making it were from an energy crop, which has got all kinds of problems, or from a waste stream, which also comes with all kinds of problems. And we went looking for a different way to feed a green gas mill, and we found grass was the perfect feedstock, has much more energy content, it grows easily and abundantly in our country, and it doesn't have not only does it not have the nature downsides of an energy crop, it has big nature upsides. We create wildlife habitats in the grass fields that we grow to make gas. It took us a few years to crack that, and our green gas mill went live in the summer last year. It was about at least 12 months delayed. We've had some teething problems, but we are operating, and we'll be at full capacity kind of shortly. And I think green gas is being overlooked by everybody. I've shared it with all the major parties. Well, there's 3 major parties. I've shared it with them, and it still doesn't feature in the conversation. We've launched 2 reports. What we've shown is that there's enough grass in Britain to make all of the gas we need. We've shown that it's vastly cheaper than a national heat pump program, which will increase everybody's energy bill by 50%. Cost obviously £8,000 to put in, and all kinds of other problems, like we have to throw away tens of millions of gas appliances, boilers and cookers, and throw away the gas grid and all that kind of stuff. Instead of changing that, we just change the gas that we put in the grid. We create 160,000 jobs in the rural economy and 15 billion a year into that same rural economy, which is a different form of leveling up. It's not south to north, it's town and city to rural, which is quite important. It's an idea with so many benefits, no downsides, but it's one of those things in my life, in this part of my life. Most of the things I've been proposing have been too good to be true to the people that are hearing them, right? And this is probably the biggest of those. It's got all of these upsides, and everybody I've told, I spoke to Ed Miliband about it first a couple of years ago, and he's like, but there must be a problem with it, right? There must be, and I understand that. There's not. We've published 2 studies. We'll publish a 3rd one shortly with the kind of macroeconomic impact of this program. We need about 3,000 what we call gas mills around the country to provide all of the gas that we need. Is zero carbon gas, by the way. I haven't said it, but it needs to be said, on a 6-month life cycle. So it's short-term kind of circle of zero carbonness. When we grow the grass, it absorbs carbon. When we break it down with AD and make gas that gets burned, that releases the carbon, but it's on a 6-month cycle. So green gas is fantastic. We went further and we looked into making protein from grass, because one of the great misunderstandings of the whole food debate is that animals don't make protein. Actually, they eat it, and we feed it to them. We feed them high-grade plant protein so that they can turn it into animal protein, usually with a diminishing return. So with a cow, the worst example, you can put 10 kilos of plant protein in to get 1 kilo of animal protein out. And that's one of the myths of the whole food debate. And so we went looking last year. We started a research project. We've in the lab, created a process to extract protein from grass. We can get twice as much out of grass as a cow can. It's an organic process, and there's 100 million tons of grass grown in Britain every year to feed to animals. And with that, we can make twice the nation's protein consumption. For me, that's a fantastic opportunity, but it bolts onto the front end of our green gas mill. So we can take out the protein, then use the grass to make gas. And for the first time ever, we were able to make energy and food from the same piece of land.
So you can do that from the same actual grass itself. It can like serve it can go into the AD process and then also have that protein extraction.
That's right.
Bringing the value from it at every single step of the way through the process.
Yeah. And we like to say we reinvented the cow, partly because we like to have fun, partly because I've been on right-wing media shows where I've been accused of wanting to uninvent the wheel, which is just ridiculous, right? And I think to myself, look, the wheel has been reinvented since it was first invented. It just keeps getting better. We've reinvented the cow because the cow eats grass, makes methane, which leaks out of both ends, and makes food. So we're going to make methane, but capture it and put it into the gas grid, and we're going to make food. So we're like the new cow.
Amazing. Where is your first grass mill?
It's in Reading.
In Reading.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So also, there's something that you said in there as well, which is around like thinking about like the broader economies and like the impacts of this and like job creation and how that's not necessarily about north south supply, but also like supporting rural areas and that into that like transition. And I think sometimes people's concerns about a change or doing things differently can come from genuine kind of fears about what will happen in their area and kind of their like livelihoods. So it's really amazing to to see you guys setting that out and making a clear plan for how that will affect people from that like justice point of view, as well as the the climate itself and greening that.
Can I just add? Yeah. What I didn't mention on your topic, on your theme completely, is that this provides a transition for farmers. We know that we have to transition away from animal agriculture. Where's the future for farmers? What we say is do what you're doing now, grow grass, but don't feed it to animals, feed it to us and we'll make gas and food from it.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's like you say, like using the existing appliances, like people with the existing skill sets and the existing livelihoods that they have. Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing more. And like you say, you've been trying to get this to have more attention. So we'll be watching excitedly to see how that goes. Speaking of government, we have obviously seen quite a lot of broken promises, U-turns, backpedaling, basically in all corners of politics, really. So we have a question from Andrea, who wants to know what's the best way to ensure political parties keep their promises on the environment and the climate crisis?
I think in Labour's case, the first thing we have to do is get them elected. And I have these conversations all of the time with people that say, but Labour have watered down this. They're not really speaking out strongly enough about that. Can we really trust them? And I say to them, first things first, we know what we get if we get another 5 years of Tories. We get more coal mines and oil and gas drilling and backpedaling on car targets and all kinds of stuff. We know what we're going to get. We just have to have faith and vote Labour, and then worry about keeping them to their promises and pushing them harder and faster when they actually are the government and can do something about it. That's step number one. We've just got to vote for them. We've got to encourage everybody to vote for them. I also believe that Labour does get the green economy. Our argument to Labour and to everybody else for the last couple of years has been this is an economic opportunity. It's no longer about polar bears on ice caps and fighting the climate change because it's an altruistic cause that will cost us money but benefit future generations of people. It's not that at all. It's going to benefit us right now. And that's a very different argument. And I'm convinced that Labour get that and they'll implement a whole range of things in the green economy because they make economic sense.
That's actually really interesting because we've got a live question that's popped up during our conversation, which kind of touches on that actually, and those perceptions about what it costs us and things, which is from Anthony, who asked, how do we overcome government propaganda that going green will increase the cost of living? So bringing that down to like an individual level, like how do we counter that really strong message?
It's difficult. I do it in every media opportunity that I get and on social media. We can all share stuff on social media as well. We're publishing a report shortly. I mentioned that we'll show the cost of Cameron's Cut the Green Crap program 10 years ago or so. And we put out a mini budget 2 weeks ago now, alongside the government's budget, that showed 5 things we can do, make an enormous difference to the cost of living. Some really simple things: price cap North Sea gas. That will knock 5 billion off of our energy bills. It won't cost us a penny. Break the link between the price of power and gas. There's another 6 billion straight off our energy bills. Not money that goes to the government. It comes straight off our energy bills. Won't cost a penny. A whole bunch of things that we can do. And I think all we can do is keep talking about them, presenting the evidence for them. And ultimately, I think what this government says doesn't matter. It matters in the context of the election, and we have to fight the lies and untruths in that arena. But what really matters is the next government, because we know what this government stand for and what they're going to do, and it doesn't, beating their arguments if they're going to be the next government, it doesn't make any difference. When Labour get elected, I hope that they will. Then it'll just be a different ball game, and we won't have a government putting out this propaganda about the fact that we can't afford something that actually we can't afford not to have.
And I think in that, for people who also, we had some questions as well that kind of touched on that idea that even if there is a change in government, they're still going to be facing these kind of similar economic challenges, or like funding challenges or fiscal challenges. But actually, I think what I'm hearing you saying is that it's just about really finding the alternatives that are real and that are funded and that, are practical, and presenting the evidence for them, and that you found, these 5 things that you can, promote those and share those, and that actually, even with a difficult economic setting, there are still things to be done and things to be changed. That's, I think, what I'm hearing.
Yeah, huge changes. Just 2 of those things is worth £10 billion a year off of our energy bills. And we've done another study that shows every pound we invest in renewable energy compared to fossil fuels gives us twice as many jobs and twice as much GDP growth. And so part of the answer to what you're saying there is that just by switching our spending from fossil fuels and the old way of doing things, we'll get a much greater economic outcome from the same sum of money. Rosebank, the government have thrown £3 billion of our money into that. It's a loss-making project. It'll be owned by a Norwegian energy company, which is state-owned anyway. The oil will never land in our country. It will go on to international markets. It was a PR project from our government, and they've thrown away £3 billion. For that sum of money, we could build about 10% of the electricity that Britain needs. So I'm confident that the economic opportunities are there. We can do it so much better than the Tories have done it without finding new money. And we will have real growth, real sustainable growth as an outcome of that.
Yeah. Well, so to take it from the big and the macro right down to the individual, quite a few people have been asking us this, and we did want to kind of land on a last final question for you, which is something more for us all to take away, which is, what can I do? What's the best thing that individuals can do to, help make progress, help fight for this change, and kind of take the approach that you're taking?
I'm going to say 2 things, or they're 2 different topics. I'll say lots of things about them. I'll be quick though. The first thing is vote, right? Vote in the election. And if you know people that aren't going to vote, encourage them to vote. We have the chance to change the direction of our country, to change everything. It's coming at us sometime in the next 6 to 8 months. The most important thing we can do to bring the change that we want is to vote. Secondly, at home, the most important thing we can do is to change how we spend money. In energy, transport, and food, it's about how we power our homes, how we travel, and what we all spend money every day. We get to choose which way the world goes round, actually, when we choose which way to spend that money. Buy renewable energy, use lower carbon forms of transport, and eat plants, not animals. And the biggest of those 3, the easiest and most impactful, is actually just stop eating animals. Because it's one of the biggest drivers of the climate crisis. It's driving the global wildlife crisis, and it's a big driver of the human health crisis as well. Those 3 big things that we're wrestling with are driven more than anything else by our choice of food.
Yeah, there's a huge, it's amazing that I think in all of your kind of outputs, in the way that you're like bringing these things together, so it's not in silos, these different parts of our lives, actually, thinking about the things that we do all the time, and like you say, contribute 80% to all of our individual impacts, which is around how we power ourselves, the energy we choose, how we get about, transport, and what we eat. And they're kind of just all these really everyday things, but they, add up to these big impacts. And also, I was wrong. We actually have time for a couple more of our questions. So I'm going to throw a couple more in. We actually, you were speaking a little bit to this there in terms of like who holds the power over different things and about ownership. So we had a question submitted in advance from someone called Jonathan, who says, you have previously stated that every privatisation of public services has failed. Could you please expand on that? I feel that privatisation of public services has, to a degree, created an even bigger challenge to reach net zero. So we'd love to hear more from you on privatisation.
And just to clarify, the end of the question was that privatisation has created a bigger challenge to get to net zero. Was that what it said?
Yes, that's what Jonathan thinks. Yes.
I agree. I mean, the energy market privatisation has been a disaster. It really has. Right now we have a market that's neither private nor public. It's heavily regulated. We have a price cap. We had mass bankruptcies in the winter of 22. Half the market went bankrupt because the price cap was badly done, capping only retail prices, not wholesale. And wholesale overtook retail and bankrupted half the market. The energy market is probably the biggest, most obvious failure. Water, though, is also big and obvious, and I know that good law campaigns on this kind of stuff. You know, the pollution that water companies, private water companies, mostly owned by offshore pension funds, the pollution they're allowed to get away with while paying massive dividends and underinvesting in our vital infrastructure. But it's criminal, actually, literally and metaphorically, it's criminal. So that's failed. Trains. Who thinks the train system works? I doubt anybody does. Buses was just a gift to a couple of private operators like Stagecoach, who have made millions or billions from it. But bus services aren't better, especially if you live in rural parts of our country. So, I mean, there is no example of privatization that actually works. It's just a dogma from Thatcher's days. It was she thought a good idea. We've been fighting this dogma for decades. We've got now an abundance of evidence that privatization of vital national infrastructure doesn't work. It's not in our interests.
Yeah, it feels like a lazy trope, doesn't it? That there's this argument and, that idea about like driving improvement, driving efficiency, whatever it might be. And it just, like you say, the evidence stacks up again and again and again. I don't know, I'm really getting from you today, there's something around like changing stories and the narratives that drive people and bring people together. That feels really important in all of this,
yes.
as well as individual policy.
No, I think you're right. I just want to say this. There's another way to look at this, right? The energy industry that was sold off was built with public money. The water industry that was sold off, the train industry, all of it built with public money. Private enterprise does not invest that kind of money to build that national infrastructure. It just doesn't. And when that infrastructure needs renewing and investing in, it doesn't do that either. And so for me, that's a perspective that undermines the whole idea that the private owners will run national utilities better than public owners, because they're in it for the short term and for dividends.
And so undervalued at the point where that's released as an asset. So then it's just gone and just like so small. Okay, I could probably talk to you about that for hours. But we also have a question from somebody who is from your ends. So this is about a question about making change locally from Simon. And he says, Dale, I live in Stroud District just like you, and I'm proud of the environmental and social awareness and activism in the area. Go Stroud. Are there any initiatives that are enacted locally that you think could be exported more widely?
I'm going to say Just Stop Oil came from Stroud, and I think that's a successful export. I think there were joined up protests across Europe this week or last week in 6 different countries, like inspired by Just Stop Oil, I'm pretty sure. I think other than that, the things that we stand for, Ecotricity, are in Stroud, and we've exported them fairly successfully as well, not just to the rest of our country, but to the rest of the world. I mean, green energy was nowhere in 1995. It's now in every, nearly every country of the world, for example. I think there's a lot of things that happen in Stroud that have travelled well, but I can think of Just Stop Oil and Ecotricity. That's all I can think of right now.
Very good exports from Stroud. I think now we are probably good to be wrapping up our questions, and I kind of want to end on, you mentioned at the beginning about what is coming next and these sort of policy recommendations and what happens beyond the election. I just wondered what like you're most excited for coming up.
That's a good question. I think I'm most excited by energy independence. The polling that we've done and other people have done shows that people get it. The vast majority of people support energy independence, and then when you tell them what it actually is, they get it even more. That excites me actually, because people are just getting the concept. They feel what energy independence is. We can do that without any public money. That's a massive opportunity. It means we can actually do it. Whatever the state of the economy the Tories leave behind, this is something we can do, and there will be massive benefits from it. So I think energy independence excites me the most. And the other stuff that's coming as well. We've got protein independence just around the corner. We can make all the protein we need from grass. I love that. Make all the gas we need from grass as well. And I think, flying without carbon emissions, kind of looking forward to that as well.
That is quite exciting. So yeah, protein powerhouse, energy independence, and then flying. What did you say? Flying
without carbon emissions. Yeah, zero carbon flying.
No, this is the thing. As you're saying it, it just sounds so kind of like too good to be true. It's like my eyes are like popping out, but that is all very, very exciting things for us to end on there. So wishing you like so much power to you with this clean power, green power, obviously to you with all of your next endeavours. And thank you so much, obviously, for joining us today. And to everybody who was listening and watching along for joining us, and to everybody who shared their questions in advance. It's been such a treat to have you, Dale. And as I mentioned, and as we've talked about in our chat today, you've brought out a new edition of your book, Manifesto, and he's very, very kindly agreed to donate part of the proceeds to Good Law Project to power some of the work that we do together and that we do to kind of fight for a greener future. It's part memoir, lots of stories from your experiences throughout, all of your different parts of your life. And it's also part blueprint and where you set out your like plans and ideas for the future. And it's also a Sunday Times #1 bestseller. So yes, it's available, this new edition, and that new edition also brings a lot into it about how politics has become this final frontier for a greener Britain. So if you're interested in getting your hands on a copy and supporting Good Law Project as well by doing so, you can go to Dale's website, which is dalevince.com/manifesto to order yours. And for more on Good Law Project and everything we're doing to protect the environment, you can check out our website at goodlawproject.org. And yeah, I think that's about it for today. Thank you so much, Dale. And thanks for listening, everyone.
My pleasure. Cheers. And thanks for having me.